The difference is that nobody gives a shit if Bud Selig's in the Hall of Fame. Most fans, I should say this, in my opinion,
That's fair.
Most fans do not care, but they care when their baseball players are in or they're not in.
That's very fair, but I think my job is to ignore that emotion and try to, like, I view it, people have asked me, what do you say to your child? What kind of example are you setting as a parent? I'll say, I'm setting an example of how to curate a museum, because that's what I'm looking for. It's intellectual consistency.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode number 220 of the Chris Rose Rotation, a production of John Boy Media. And this is always my favorite one that we do of the year because we are breaking down the Hall of Fame ballot, also talking some other major baseball topics with three of the smartest minds we've got going in the baseball world, or at least two of the smartest minds, and one guy I've known since college. So he has to come on. That's the way it goes. First of all, Susan Slusser from the San Francisco Chronicle. She has been a Hall of Fame voter since 2002. Susan, it is so good to see you again. How are you?
I'm very well. It's delightful to be here. I feel like we used to talk a little more regularly, so this is good. Yeah.
I know. Well, I got to get out to the stadiums a little bit more, so don't ignore me when I see you out there, okay?
I'll try not to.
Thank you. First time I get to say hello to LaVelle Neal, a columnist for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. He is casting his ballot for the 20th year. LaVelle, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's amazing how I had to add up how many years I've been voting for the Hall. I didn't realize I had gotten to 20. So I guess I'm a veteran voter now.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. More veteran than this last person. As I mentioned, I went to the University of Michigan for 1 year with them before they kicked me out of school. They technically didn't. I left on my own. At least that's what I'm sticking with. Kenny Davidoff, who has been a Hall of Fame voter since 2007. Hello, Dominoes. How you doing, bud?
My friend, I might be a dumb unemployed guy, but I'm a dumb unemployed guy with a national football champ as an alma mater. So
yes,
hail to the victors. Yeah, we know.
The proud
congratulations. Tip of the
Great
cap,
day to be a Michigan Wolverine.
All right, that's it. We got to move on. By the way, LaVelle, congratulations. You win most interesting Zoom angle in the history of this show. Great job.
Well, I got some bad lighting going on right now, so I look like a silhouette, so I apologize.
No, that's good. It's all good. All right, gang, before we get started on some topics for the Hall of Fame, I want each of you to maybe take 60 seconds and kind of explain to everybody out there the process. How do you go through your Hall of Fame ballot? Is it something you just sit in a corner with for a week by yourself? Do you talk to your colleagues about it? I'm going to have Susan go first, then LaVelle, and then Kenny, you finish it up.
This is something that I have, I think I'm on my 22nd ballot or something. I spend a lot of time thinking about year round, right? Like whenever the topic comes up, people do want to talk about it. So I put a lot of thought into it, kind of like there's no set time. But the easiest way to go about it every year is to look at the no-brainers. This year, somebody like Beltran, and then fill in. And I used to be a small hall person. When I first started voting, it was like you had to be a slam dunk Hall of Famer. And I often just voted for a handful of guys. I never maxed out my ballot. We've had such a log jam essentially since the steroid guys came onto the ballot. There's been such a log jam. I maxed out. I don't like guys to fall off the ballot too soon or deserving of more than, a year of consideration. So I try to keep that in mind too. And that can make things tricky because we've got this whole rule of 10 where we can only vote 10. So this year there are guys like Abreu who in a lot of years I would give a vote, and I didn't this year because I wanted to make sure that all the guys I feel like continue to need to be considered year after year, given the log jam, are continued to be looked at. So it's a long, involved process, and I think most of us take it very seriously.
LaVelle?
As the years go by, you watch players accumulate stats, and you look, all of a sudden you look and you see, wow, 10th year, 11th year, 12th year. You do start thinking about, okay, this person's on a Hall of Fame path. But to me, it's almost like a mini Christmas Day when I get the ballot in the mail, because I open up the ballot and I look at the names of the players and the boxes next to them, and I immediately tick off guys who I think are locks. To me, Beltran's in that group as well. And then as we go along, I'll I don't know if I talk too much about that with other reporters. Sometimes during the baseball season, you may run into each other somewhere and have discussions that may end up heading toward who's a Hall of Famer or not. Usually about the middle of December, I'll start looking in on the people who may not be slam dunk choices, because I think the voting has gotten more nuanced in recent years. And Susan alluded to the logjam that we have created that we need to address. So, and then I do some research. I think Jay Jaffe's a gift from God. His work with determining who's a Hall of Famer and who's not is a great resource for me every year. And then usually by the last week of December, I fill in my ballot and I drive to the post office at the airport and put my ballot in a couple of days before the 31st. And that's my process.
Yeah, not entirely dissimilar to Susan or LaVelle. It is in the back of my mind year round. I'm always thinking about it, especially now because I do now that I call myself retired. This is the one thing that I'm still involved in. I'll do it for another 10 years before they take it away from me. And I do get to a point in December where I'll sit down and really just do some number crunching. But I do, like Susan, I'm a big Hall person. I can't imagine ever leaving a space blank as long as I'm doing this. So when people ask me, is player X, player Y a Hall of Famer? I say yes, but really the key question is, are they top 10 on my ballot? Because we have that cap at 10. Yeah, I crunch the numbers and I factor in other things, just their impact on the game, even postseason. I do think if it's someone's last year on the ballot, I factor that into. There was one of those this year. And then I fill it out and send it in.
Have any of you ever felt guilty about leaving somebody off?
Every year.
Who, Kenny? Do you
Billy
remember one
Wagner.
in particular?
Yeah, Billy Wagner. I mean, Billy Wagner, I'm so fond of personally. I got to know him during his time with the Mets. I have never voted for Billy, and that was actually what I had in mind when I just said, like,
Wow.
is Billy Wagner Hall of Famer? I think he is, but I just haven't yet found a way to put him in my top 10 at the expense of others who, to be frank, I think are even bigger yeses on whether they should be in.
Well, I'm curious. Susan and LaVelle, it's up to you whether or not you want to reveal who you voted for, but did either of you put Billy Wagner on your ballot? I would have if I had a ballot.
Yeah.
You
He's
did,
on
Susan?
mine. Yeah, he
He's
has
on-
been consistently on mine. Yeah.
He's on mine as well. The weird thing that I went through this year was looking at Chase Utley. I'm going, I think Chase is a Hall of Famer, but it made me go back to look at Jimmy Rollins because someone who's been voting for years. I always think about how Alan Trammell's in the Hall and Lou Whitaker isn't, So I'm headed down that path now with Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley, who played next to each other for years in Philadelphia. So I got Utley in and Rollins out, and I'm wondering if I'm going to have to go back to that debate in future years.
Are you comfortable, Susan, with flip-flopping? What I mean by that is 1 year somebody's not on your Hall of Fame ballot, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, of course they're a Hall of Famer. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, usually that's when either a space opens up. I've had some people who have bounced in and out. Jeff Kent was one for a long time. If there was a spot, I would throw him in. If there wasn't, I didn't. Because he was a little bit borderline, it was clear, from the numbers, he probably wasn't going to make it. But he's somebody that I always felt like deserved to vote when there was a possibility. Now that I'm voting all 10, and I chaired a committee for the BBWAA that actually looked at all of this, looked at the voting and maybe expanding the voting. We actually requested to the Hall of Fame that they expand it to 12. We knew we weren't going to get unlimited, which is what everyone wanted. And the response was we essentially we like it as it is. So we're limited to that. And now that I do vote the full 10, there's almost always somebody that is off for a year and then comes back if a spot opens up. And spots aren't opening up enough. And I have long thought that what we used to call the Veterans Committee and is now the Eras Committee, I would like to see them putting in more players.
Yep.
I was actually on that committee last year. I'm not allowed to talk about the inner workings, but obviously it's Hall of Fame players and some executives and a couple of writers. LaVelle has also did that with me last year. But I would like to see that as a means to also add more players. You mentioned somebody like Whitaker. I think those are important conversations to be had too, because a lot of guys do either come off too early, especially now with the logjam, or this whole era is underrepresented, and the one just before it is a little underrepresented, and there are positions that are underrepresented too, and I think that needs.
Okay, very good, very good. LaVelle, let's start with you in terms of people that are on the ballot this year. I think we all agree Adrian Beltre will see in Cooperstown. Doesn't mean he's not worthy of discussion. It just means we'll see in Cooperstown. Joe Mauer is also a first time on the ballot. You're up there in Minneapolis. Is he a Hall of Famer?
I voted for Joe. And I mean, it's been a very interesting debate. And actually, that's one of the cases where this was coming up 3, 4, 5 years ago with other reporters I run into on the road or when they come through Minneapolis. Is Joe Mauer a Hall of Famer? And I think it's some of the things he did as a catcher is undeniable. The 3 batting titles, the MVP award, the multiple times All-Star. He just did some things that no catcher's ever done. But the concussion altered his career significantly. He moved to first base afterwards. So the conversations I've had with a lot of writers is that his 10 years as a catcher are enough to not ding him too much for the 5 years as a first baseman. Because as a first baseman, he was like average, But as a catcher, he was among the best in the business and did everything well, controlled the running game, handled pitchers, pitch framing, offense, complete package. So I voted for Joe. I always felt he was going to get in eventually. Wasn't sure he was going to get on the first ballot, but he just might get in on the first ballot this year.
Kenny?
Yeah, I was a yes on Mauer. Yeah, and to answer LaVelle's question, for me, is 10 years as an elite catcher enough? Yes. I mean, that's catcher is such a grind of a position. And when you look, very few of these guys are Yadi Molina and are doing it until they're 40. A lot of these guys had to shift or move off or saw their production drop, whether it's Mike Piazza or even Johnny Bench at the end of his career. So yeah, for me, Joe was a pretty easy yes.
Susan, the argument against him was, well, he didn't have enough pop. The guy he could put the ball in play whenever he wanted to. Had one season where he hammered a bunch of homers, and that was it.
He was a pretty dominant player for a long time. The best player of the franchise for a long time. Perennial all-star. He's somebody that I was always kind of eyeing as somebody I would vote for the first time if there were enough spots available, depending on what kind of happened in previous years. And for me, he was just like an absolute, I looked, at all the numbers, but for me, yeah, absolutely. He's somebody that should be there.
Only two catchers have gotten in on the first ballot, and that's Pudge and Johnny Bench.
I heard they were pretty good. Like, fine if you're interested in catchers that can play offense and defense, what have you.
What's going on, everybody? DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer that'll help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code ROSE, and new customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code ROSE. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of the Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 160 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/football for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Now back to the show.
Let's move on to a really, really interesting name, in my opinion. Gary Sheffield. And I want you to raise your hand if you think he has been unfairly kept out of Cooperstown because of PED claims. Unfairly kept out of Cooperstown. Oh, wow. LaVelle's really struggling with this. You kind of gave me is that a half hand raised, or I can't tell from the saying.
I think he's played a part in that with him. The thing about Gary too is that he bounced around through a lot of teams, and I don't know how much that's hurt him, but my goodness, I keep thinking about when he was playing. There were very few sluggers who were more feared than Gary Sheffield, and I think about how he performed against contemporaries, and I think that's always pushed me to vote for him. But yeah, the PED thing I still think looms over the ballot a lot, Chris. It's still there. I'm curious to see how many people vote for A-Rod or Manny Ramirez. They're still on the ballot now, and there is a Sheffield question as well. But I don't think his case is that severe as some others. So I look at his numbers and go, my goodness, look what he did during his career. I just think Sheffield deserves it.
Except that the difference is that Manny Ramirez was suspended, A-Rod suspended.
And A-Rod was after they toughened the drug policy. Both those were after they toughened the drug policy.
Right.
To me, that's a double ding.
Yeah, there are other guys in there that are already in that have been connected to steroids, I think, as much as Sheffield has been. So I don't know if that's what's keeping him out. I do think maybe the bouncing around. I think some people see him as borderline, which I don't. But I don't. Certainly, it's not to the extent of A-Rod or Manny, both of whom I vote for. But yeah, he's I'm not quite sure what it is, but I don't think it's the PEDs as much as it is for some other guys.
So both of you, Susan and LaVelle, I just want to get this correct. You both voted for Sheffield this year.
Yes.
Kenny?
I did too. And I mentioned earlier, there was someone in his final year who I factored that into my vote. And that's Sheff. I didn't want to be the one keeping Sheff out in his final year because I do believe he's a Hall of Famer. Yeah, he is a fascinating case, because of everything we've discussed here. Like going back to the start of at one point he said that he purposely threw the ball away, right, when he was with the Brewers.
Yes.
But then it turns out there's no evidence that he actually did that. So that's Sheff, like you have to kind of just wade through a lot of stuff. And even the steroids thing is fascinating to me because like David Ortiz is in. David Ortiz failed a test and he's in. So Sheff, took some as far as he says, and we know, took some stuff in Barry Bonds and claims he didn't know was illegal, and that was that. He and Barry had a falling out. So yeah, I agree with Susan. I don't think that's the only thing keeping him out. I think even if you do the statistical breakdown, his defense doesn't measure well. But I certainly think it's a significant factor in why he hasn't gotten it.
I think it's been tough for writers to evaluate players from that era because I don't think we know exactly how many people were riding dirty at the time. And it could have been juice players, hitters facing juice pitchers. And so then why are we devaluing someone if everybody was, it's like driving down a highway. There's no cop on the highway. We're all doing 75. Okay. It's the same thing for baseball until they toughen the drug policy.
Yeah, I've talked about this a lot. My stance on the steroid guys, once sort of the lead figures of the era went in basically automatically as soon as they were able, Selig, La Russa, Cox, those guys, I was like, I don't understand. And there were obviously players who had been linked to steroids at that point who were in. I felt like there's no justification for keeping out anyone linked to steroids. It clearly the Hall of Fame was not taking that into account when they were putting people in. Nope. But except for I feel like now just except for the two guys that seem to be held up for the whole era, and I don't get it. But whatever, that's a different topic.
Selig getting did it for me. That's what kind of pushed me over the top on that.
Me too.
LaVelle, I thought I heard you correctly. Did you say you vote for A-Rod and Manny?
No, I do not. I do not.
Did not. Okay.
No, those are two cases where.
Oh, you did, Susan.
Yep.
Okay.
Really? And I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I once I decided I was voting for the steroid guys and that steroids don't matter. I decided it doesn't matter for anybody, even if you fail a test, because there are guys that are probably even now who are, cheating tests. And who else from that era? I don't know. I'm just going straight, absolute results on the field because baseball was complicit, might be a strong word in this, but baseball didn't take care of it when they had to, helped the problem along. And all I can go with is the results on the field. And MLB clearly does not care that much about this as a topic, I don't think.
That clearly takes the sanctimony out of the process. I think that it may be a better way to look at it because in the NFL, someone gets busted for taking steroids, everybody just laughs it off. So are we being too stringent with this? I mean, I think about that often, especially when the ballot comes out.
So, Kenny, does it make you sick when some writers sit there and say, well, listen, I've done as much investigative journalism as I can. And although I have voted for these people, I just could never narrow it down. And somebody says, yeah, that guy definitely did it. But even though this person didn't fail a test, I still think I know that they did it.
Yeah, I don't love that. I definitely don't. Look, Sammy Sosa, look, there's obviously there's the eyes, right? Like certainly we're all suspicious of how he turned from a nobody to an all-timer. And then of course he pretended not to speak English at that memorable congressional hearing. But there has never been one scintilla of evidence actually linking him to the drug or a drug dealer. So yeah, I'm just I'm a due process person, I guess. So yeah, that's why I decided to vote for Sammy and McGuire and Clemens and Bond. And I took the next leap in terms of guys found guilty, A-Rod, Manny, because when Bud got in, and I've discussed this with you, Chris, is Bud was found guilty of colluding back in the 80s as the Brewers owner, and like which really damaged the game more. All these guys juicing up and producing more entertaining games, or like we're all old enough to remember the 80s, oh, Tim Raines is on no one's roster. Why is Tim Raines on no one's roster? Oh, because the owners colluded to keep him out of baseball. Oh, okay. Well, that doesn't seem good. So to me, that scandal is far worse than guys juicing up to try to hit more home runs.
Except, in fairness, the difference is that nobody gives a shit if Bud Selig's in the Hall of Fame. Most fans, I should say this, in my opinion,
that's fair.
Most fans do not care, but they care when their baseball players are in or they're not in.
That's very fair, but I think my job is to ignore that emotion and try to, I view it, people have asked me, what do you say to your child? What kind of example are you setting as a parent? I'll say, I'm setting an example of how to curate a museum, because that's what I'm looking for. It's intellectual consistency.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious issue here is the character clause, right? It's spelled out on the ballot in numerous ways that we're supposed to take character into account. It doesn't define that. There's nothing about failing tests. There's nothing about doing illegal activities. There's nothing about, domestic violence. Like, there's just no stipulation about what. It's a personal interpretation. I think we can all agree that cheating is wrong. It creates an uneven playing field. LaVelle makes a good point. Was it uneven if everybody's doing it? Greenies, everybody was doing greenies in the 70s and 80s. To me, that was very much level playing field. Illegal, sure. But everybody was doing it. Nobody, it wasn't even a secret. Like, they were out in the open and, joked about constantly. And people talked about it openly even when they got banned. Like, oh man, I'm struggling now because there's no greenies. But does that make it okay? I don't know. It's a very personal thing defining character, but none of the other halls of fame include a character class. They don't have to consider that. They go with results. I feel like maybe that's the way we should go. The hall has been very firm. We've asked them, could you please explain what you mean? Could you please give us some guidance, especially on these steroid guys? And they're like, no, we like this clause. We like you to consider it. We're not going to tell you what it means. In things like the ERAS committee, the steroid guys are still not getting in by and large off the ERAS committee. So maybe they have a different interpretation. I don't know. But then the managers and Selig went in.
The Hall is not an All Saints club.
No, it is not. Susan, I'm curious. Did you ask them to remove the character clause instead of just define it?
No, I don't think anybody's ever asked for that. I think it certainly would make it easier, but I think we have asked in some years, like, do you have an official position, especially on steroids?
Okay.
And we've gotten and look, they shouldn't be in the position of telling people how to vote. Okay. I appreciate that. I respect that, but it certainly has complicated things, and not just for us, for them, for the veterans, for the players who were on the ERAS committee, the execs. Nobody really knows how to interpret these things.
I want to put a bow on this if I can. Just a simple yes or no. A-Rod, I believe, is third year on the ballot. Last year when he got almost 36% of the voter, his third year this year. So he's got a lot of time. Yes or no, do you think he will get in? LaVelle?
No.
Kenny?
I don't know.
Susan?
Nope.
So all this TV works for nothing.
Hey, and I see the guy now. He's a Timberwolves owner.
Yes. Yes, he is. I'm
And he's
sure
admitted, he says he's done things that deserve going into the hall, and he's done things that also have hurt his case. He knows what he's done.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure he probably explains it to you. Great. LaVelle, I've done some things that are very good for the game. I've done some things that are not very good for the game. And have you seen Karl Anthony Towns play? He's very
Yeah,
good.
that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Thank you. First year of eligibility last year for Carlos Beltran, 46%. Raise your hand if you think Carlos Beltran will be the scapegoat of the Astros cheating scandal and thus never get in. Nobody's agreeing with that. Kenny? No, you think people will see past that?
I think so. He's trending up, right? I haven't checked Ryan Thibodeau lately. He's doing a lot better this year, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
He is.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think there was a bit of a 1-year penalty there. And again, I think for maybe some of the older school voters, like I think he's not a slam dunk statistically, even though I strongly disagree. I could just see some older school voters not being fully convinced on him. But yeah, I do think eventually he'll get in.
So
Yeah, that cheating thing seemed to be like kind of a takes a village thing, like pinning
Mm.
that on one guy. Sort of like the steroid era. Especially somebody with that great a career, that seems a little unfair.
Basically, it's Dodger fans. Here's the thing. I was covering the Royals when Beltran was like breaking into the majors, and I had a conversation with him when he was like 20 or 21, and he was telling me a story about how he was. I can't remember if he was hitting left-handed or solely right-handed, and he wanted to be a switch hitter, and the team wouldn't let him be a switch hitter, and so he just said, "Screw this," and went to winter ball one year and came back a switch hitter, and the guy was articulating hitting better than like 8-year veterans on the Royals team. So I think the trash can thing is just a blip in his career, because I think he's always had a great knowledge about hitting, and it's been a highly productive player.
Let's move on to Todd Helton. 72% of the ballot last year on 6th season on the ballot. So he's awfully close. Susan, do you think that he has been kept out because of the Coors Field effect? And if so, will that change shortly?
I do. I think that's certainly factored. I think anybody that plays there kind of gets that knock. I sure hope that this is his year, because that would help with unclogging things a little bit. And he's deserving. Like, look at the numbers. I a little bit. Hey, look, it's not his fault where he plays, and the numbers were great. So not everybody who plays there has put up those kind of numbers. It's good enough for me.
Kenny?
Yeah, I've always been a yes for Helton. Again, yeah, I think I'm one of 2 voters who voted for Larry Walker all 10 years he was on the ballot. I think John Parado from Pittsburgh was the other one. So I'm just looking at like OPS plus, which is a statistic I really respect. Todd Helton's OPS plus was 133. That means 33% of the league average, and that factors in ballpark. So that's factoring in Coors Field into that formula and accounting for it, essentially penalizing him for playing in Coors Field, right? And he's still 33% better than the average. So he's been a yes every year for me.
The thing for me is that he was a great hitter. I mean, you could bring in the Coors Field factor, but I think there was 8 or 9 years where he had more walks than strikeouts. I mean, this guy was just a stud at the plate, and I can't believe the Rockies didn't do more damage when he had Helton at first, LeMahieu at second, Tulowitzki at short, and was an Arenado at third. My God, how did that infield not just hit them into the World Series? I don't get it. So no, I'm a Todd Helton fan, and I've been voting for him.
Who were the pitchers on that team, LaVelle?
I know. You can't. Mike Hampton? No, that's
no
after Hampton. No,
not.
He had long taken his kids out of the Denver school system by the time those guys got there.
Oh, you remember that? God,
Well
that's pretty
played.
good.
Well played. Just in case you're curious, his home OPS 1048. The road was 855, which incidentally is better than Hall of Famers Dave Winfield, Tony Gwynn, and George Brett. So if you're going to say, well, look at the difference, still better than some pretty good players that have made their way into the Hall of Fame. before we move on to just baseball topics, is there one player you'd like to take a stand for that maybe isn't in the forefront of our followers' minds here? LaVelle, is there somebody?
Jimmy Rollins may be one for me. He had an exemplary career at shortstop, highly productive at the plate. I voted for him. I think that he should be looked at differently for the totality of his career. So that would be the one I would jump on top. Just going to the past, I think this is one reason how we've had to evolve with the times here. I think writers had problems with relievers and voting relievers in the hall. Always voted for like Lee Smith and those guys to get in. I'm a little miffed that even though I know I'm biased because I covered it, I think Joe Nathan should still be on the ballot, because if you put Nathan's peak years next to Wagner's, they're not that much different. But I just think that attitudes have changed a little bit, and we're gonna have to continue to change, because identifying who's a great starting pitcher is getting tougher, because the whole thing, the ace pitcher is becoming extinct in baseball. Because before it used to be a horse, a guy could throw 50 innings and dominate, and now you have like 8 or 9 pitchers getting to 200 innings a year. So we're going to have to redefine what counts as defines excellence and Hall of Fame worthiness as a starting pitcher.
Susan?
Yeah, I'm with LaVelle on the reliever thing, which leads me to Wagner, who we touched on, but I think he is not getting enough love. I think he's a guy who should be in. Look at the number of years he was among the best in the game, and I think a lot of things have hurt him, but he just seems to be discounted for some reason. And I'd like to see more reliever. I'd like to see more players, period, but I'd like to see more relievers. And going back, we mentioned Whitaker, the guy that I always beat the drum for in committees and whenever asked, is Bobby Grich. Second base just is completely underrepresented in the hall, and it kind of started there when he got overlooked, and that's just kind of skyrocketed. Like you can draw basically a line. Rich not getting in, a Whitaker, and now I worry that it might happen to Utley, who is a great player. So, yeah, I feel pretty strongly about those guys.
Kenny?
Yeah, I agree with everything both of you said, and I will tout Andrew Jones. I just think brilliant career. He's a rising stock in this. It's looking better for him. But I think he gets penalized because he just fell off a cliff once he left the Braves. Really, the last 5 years of his career, he kind of evolved from a high-paid bust to a low-paid useful reserve. But those first 12 years or so were superb. Just an elite defensive center fielder who slugged, and I think he is a no-brainer.
If he does get into the Hall of Fame, they're going to have to move up the podium to a very shallow part of Cooperstown. We've never, ever seen somebody play a more shallow center field in the history of the sport. That dude could just do anything. He was great. Let's hit some fun baseball topics, if you don't mind. Let's see if you agree with this statement. Raise your hand if you agree with it. What the Dodgers have done this offseason is horrible for baseball. Got nobody raising their hands. There's a lot of people out there, LaVelle, who are like, man, they're ruining the sport. Why do you not agree with that?
This has happened multiple years during these off seasons when a team just blows everybody out of the water with a gargantuan contract and make splashy moves. And if we go back the last 8-10 years, the team that wins the offseason often does not win the World Series that year. So, and they're gonna pay ridiculous money to Ohtani to be a DH in year one. So I want to see how the Dodgers maneuver through all this. So huge expectations, huge payroll, and I think it's good for the game just because of the conversation it creates. But it doesn't mean success. It doesn't guarantee success when you have a off season like they've had.
Susan?
I agree with that. I think a lot of people have issues with the deferrals, especially a lot of the other agents. But that's, what? They found a loophole. It's legal under baseball's current terms. I do think that there are probably going to be some tax ramifications and legalities around it, particularly in the state of California, And I think it might be a loophole that other teams want to make sure is closed next time around in the CBA, but it's okay for now. So they took advantage of it. If Ohtani wants to wait that long to get paid, right now that's his right. Does that upset the balance of things? Because then they can go out and spend more on anyone else, and obviously have. Maybe, but I didn't see anyone else doing it. That was the same deal that the Ohtani camp took to everybody, and nobody else did it. So
I'm just happy his dog has a visa now.
Nice. Susan, do you think that Shohei has to win multiple rings in order to justify the size of that contract?
no, it's not on him. I mean, I think he needs to produce, but I don't think the rings are solely going to be on Ohtani. I think the Dodgers need to win multiple rings to justify having done that, but that's not on Ohtani. He, by agreeing to defer, he's kind of doing all he can to make sure that they are good. So I don't have any issues with him whatsoever. I only wish the Giants had gotten him because I love watching that guy play.
Same here. I think he is. I don't think we talk enough about him. As much as we talk about him, we do not talk enough about him. I explain it to my football friends who asked me at NFL Network the day after he signed for $700 million. They're like, how's that possible? And I explained to them the business side of things. And I said, guys, it's the equivalent of Patrick Mahomes leading the league in touchdown passes and sacks. It's just not going to happen. So please just enjoy it. And, don't ask why and all this sort of stuff. But I don't know, LaVelle, like if he goes ringless in 10 years, people are going to see it as a failed contract, even if he wins multiple MVPs and continues to pitch at a high level, let's say, for the next 5 years.
Yeah, but that's a reflection of how the rest of the roster is constructed. There's a ring argument comes up a lot with the NBA. How you're trying to separate, great players is how many rings they've won. Well, how many rings that Ernie Banks win? He was still a fantastic player. So I'm not going to hold that over Ohtani's head. It's about the team that's put around him, because I know he's a rare player for this era, being able to dominate two sides of the at the plate and throwing over the plate. But you still more to winning a championship than just having one guy.
I do think, Chris, since you asked this question, you can kind of get more granular on it when you talk about the man you impersonate so well, A-Rod. So, going back to his time with the Yankees, that really defined his postseason failures, defined him. And to some extent, I think still do, even though he had the one brilliant postseason 2009 when he was the most important player as the Yankees won a ring. Many Yankees fans who intensely dislike him will point to all the other postseasons when he let them down. So with Ohtani, if he's never played in October, right? So if he has bad Octobers, and that's going to be something looming over him. But if it's a matter of like a repeat of what we saw this past October against Arizona, where they're never even in the game because their pitching is terrible, that's a different narrative.
Okay, fair enough. Speaking of pitching, it's an uncomfortable topic, but one that I think is necessary. Kenny, let's start with you. Do you think Trevor Bauer will ever throw another pitch at the Major League Baseball level?
I do, Chris. I'm very curious to hear what my colleagues think, because they're more plugged in than I am at this point. But when I saw him do that little media tour last week, finally expressing contrition, we can question the sincerity of that contrition, but he at least said it. I said, okay, this guy's looking to get back in. And I can't imagine a big market team signing him, but I can envision a smaller market team signing him.
Susan?
I agree. I think we've seen, say, with somebody like Aroldis Chapman, there are teams that are willing to overlook potential issues off the field, criminal or otherwise, even if allegations. I mean, these were very severe allegations. And look, I don't know the ins and outs of, grand juries and testimony and, failing to pick up a case and what that actually means, vis-a-vis somebody's guilt or not. But there were some facts that came out through all this that have not been disputed that were unsettling, very unsettling. And I think that will hurt him with a number of teams, but not all teams. We've just seen there are too many teams willing to take a chance on a guy who has a checkered past of any kind, including guys who have actually been found by baseball to have done something, that warrants a very lengthy suspension.
Yeah, I think Bauer is showing that he knows that he's going to have to admit some of his transgressions in the past, and I think you're going to see him do more of this going forward to set the stage for him to return to Major League Baseball. And whether it's right or not, as time goes on, some of these wounds do heal just because there's the time passes on, and I think it's gonna lead to him pitching for someone eventually. Maybe, I don't know about this year, maybe next year. I think we're going to see Trevor Bauer back in the majors.
It's interesting. I do a daily podcast with Trevor Plouffe here at John Boy Media, and we had a recent discussion the day
I know
after.
that guy.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah, me too.
I can't wait to actually get some good stories from you two offline. This will be good. I need more ammo. But we talked about it the day after Bauer did his first interview on Fox News. I have firmly been with the stance, once again, never criminally charged. I understand that. He has a right to work as long as he has served at whatever penalty. What I said was, if I was one of the 30 owners, I would want nothing to do with him, in part because I don't trust him to have changed in certain areas. And I think that he might be conning some people here. So it's not as simple as, boy, the guy's a damn good pitcher. That is not it. I would tell, if I were an owner, I would tell my talent evaluators, go find somebody as good as that dude over there that doesn't have anything in his past. I know it might not be that simple, and some people say, well, you can get him on the cheap. End of the day, you got to put your head on the pillow, people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Am I off base there, Susan?
No, I agree with you. There are definitely going to be teams that feel like that, 100%, and I absolutely understand why. Any team that signs Trevor Bauer, or someone, say, like Aroldis Chapman, etc., is going to get a firestorm of reaction from fans and from media. There are some areas where that might be a little more palatable, smaller places that haven't won in a while. And you know what? I have to say, the amount of the contract might matter. If you can get somebody with that kind of track record on the cheap, I really think that some team's going to do it. But it's not just going to be under fire from local media. And I do hope that everything is looked at, extremely closely wherever he goes, if he does. It's going to be national media, and it's going to be a nonstop story wherever he goes, certainly for at least the first year, if and when he comes back. It's not going to go away. So teams have to be ready for that. And a lot of teams are going to be like, I just don't, I can't say all things being equal, because it's going to be hard to find somebody of that ability to just sign instead of him. But he just might not be worth it with all the
LaVelle, did you have something you wanted to finish that up with?
I just think that teams and their desire to win will lead them down this path, and they're going to look at any possibility to bring someone who can help them win. And that's why I can see a return of Trevor Bauer, but they have to understand what they're going to take on. You're looking at potential protests, fans booing him on the road. Are you ready for dealing with all the different things that will come with bringing such a controversial figure into the game? So it's not easy. With 30 teams, all it takes is one. And I think there's going to be one out there.
Yeah, great point. I mean, Denver Broncos made Tim Tebow a first-round pick. So you're right. It only takes one. I think this is probably the last one I want to hit. In the last year plus, the regional sports landscape has significantly shifted to the point where several teams came out loud, basically in the offseason, and said, we don't know what sort of budget we're dealing with because we don't know what's happening with Bally's. And I don't mean to pick on them, but they're the main carrier that everybody has front and center right now. Is this just an excuse for owners, LaVelle, or is this a legit concern that baseball fans should be worried about?
Well, I think for smaller market teams, it's a concern. I think the larger market teams who have their own television networks can protect themselves from some of this. It's funny you brought it up, because the Twins are one of the teams that are affected by the Victory Sports / Bally's conundrum. And there was supposed to be a hearing on January 10th to try to solve it. It's been postponed 10 days because there's a good chance that they're going to reach an agreement to run it back one more year. So everybody has a year to figure out what the path is going forward. But I talked to someone on Monday who stays in tune with a lot of broadcasting news. And he was like, if MLB thinks that they can make money from streaming, they got another thing coming. He said, Netflix is the only streaming company that's making money out there. Everybody else is taking a bath. So MLB might want to brace streaming in the future, but they may want to wait a few years before they push that button and look for other ways to keep baseball on television.
Susan, is it a concern?
Yeah, it's an absolute concern. I don't think it's a business model that works anymore. The Giants are one of those teams that has, they certainly have a major share in their local regional network, and that's not necessarily a plus right now. Those RSNs are struggling, and if you're a part owner and you're, potentially putting more in than you're getting out, and the advertising's not there, you're relying on the cable fees, and those are starting to go away with cord cutting. It's just that's a problem. I agree with LaVelle. I'm not sure streaming is the answer. MLB, I think, is working on all sorts of different potential scenarios, all of which are probably going to wind up being more costly for the consumer. And I'm not sure it's going to attract more of an audience. And MLB is a sport that needs more audience, not less. If that's a revenue stream that goes away, and you still need eyeballs, you got to figure out something else. So do we see even more advertising on uniforms, et cetera? Sure. Do we see higher ticket prices? Maybe, but that's not going to help either. I think as advertising goes away everywhere, this is really just kind of the start. We're going to see all sorts of problems, I think, with all the RSNs coming up, including team-owned ones.
All right, I think I lied. Ken Davidoff, you told us that you would give us your ballot before we left.
Sure, happy to.
Why don't you? Why don't
Sure,
you?
we discussed some of them, but so my ballot is Alex Rodriguez, Adrian Beltre, Chase Utley, Carlos Beltran, Manny Ramirez, Andrew Jones, Todd Helton, Bobby Abreu, Joe Mauer, Gary Sheffield.
And
Bob Abreu. Wow.
So Billy Wagner was number 11.
He was 11, 12. Pettit was up there too. Mark Burley. So.
Okay.
Yeah, Burley was a tough one for me to leave off. I voted for him the other years.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that because when you covered his games, you'd be out in an hour and 58 minutes? You
Pretty
wanted to repay
pretty
him?
much. He and Mark Mulder twice pitched on firework nights in Oakland, and they had to wait for like more than an hour to start the fireworks because it was still too light because their games are too fast. So yeah, that's definitely
great.
A consideration. Now, he was just one of the most consistently good pitchers for a very long time. I absolutely a pro's pro. I think guys like that need to stay on that. And I'm happy to give my ballot if you're looking for ballots.
I am, absolutely. Let's do it.
Beltran, Beltre, Helton, Jones, Mauer, Manny Ramirez, Rodriguez, Sheffield, Utley, and Wagner.
So is there somebody who was 11?
Abreu, I left Abreu and Burley were probably my 11 and 12.
Got it. And LaVelle, I don't mean to take away the postal service near the airport in Minneapolis. They're big day, but it's up to you.
Well, I feel peer pressure now. As long as Thibodeau's not listening, as long as Thibodeau's not listening and adding up the numbers, because I just don't think it's fair to the candidates to have that drawn out on them. Like Torrey Hunter is like trying to stay on the ballot. He's on the cusp of 5%. Sheffield's on the last year of his eligibility. I just don't know if that is fair to them to have that drug out. But my ballot was Beltre, Helton, Jones, Mauer, Sheffield, Utley, Wagner, and I wish I would have voted for Rollins, I think, and may have to next year.
Okay. We appreciate you sharing all of that. I know you all take it very seriously. It's a ton of fun, once we see who gets in, who gets out. The amount of discussion we have in this sport is just unreal, because I think the Hall of Fame in this sport is held in such high regard. Listen, I also work in the NFL, but man, the voting when it comes to the Baseball Hall of Fame, there is nothing like it. There's nothing like it.
It's more transparent than the other sports. Tell me who picks the NBA Hall of Famers. Tell me what that process is.
Is it a Woj?
Yeah, it is just Woj. Exactly. NHL, they say on their website, we're not releasing our ballot results. So this is it's great for the sport. It gives us something to talk about during the winter. And I check my box to have my ballot posted online 2 weeks after the vote. So, and I'm more than happy to write about it after the vote's announced. I'd like to see the Hall of Fame have its day in the sun when they announce their winners. But I still think it's an argument that why baseball hasn't totally relinquished its status as the national pastime, just because of the conversations like this that these processes create.
Oh, it's really interesting. By the way, I know, Kenny, in years past, you've told us that you have people that just come at you when
Oh,
you
yeah.
release, right?
Yeah, it
gets
was
a little-
fun because now that I don't have a gig, but I'm teaching at a college. So a year ago, I was teaching a sports journalism class at Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. So first day of class, I said, "All right, I'm going to tweet out my ballot. Now let's see how the reactions go." So it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's good. You ever have like a player come up and talk to you about it?
I don't believe I have. I don't believe I have.
Has anybody had a player come up and talk to them about their ballot?
Can't remember. Can't think of one.
Okay, good.
Can't think of one.
Not
Make-
Hall of Fame. I often get it for postseason awards.
There you go.
Not
Yeah.
always, but now and then, yeah.
Really?
Mhm.
Like players will be like, "Why didn't you vote for this person?"
It's actually a little bit more usually before the vote. People say like who you're voting for, like especially if it's very if there's like a two-man race. The 2012 between Trout and Cabrera, there was so much interest in that year. I had lots of players trying to weigh in before the fact on that one.
Oh, do you remember who you voted for?
Yeah, I voted for Cabrera.
He won.
He did win.
This was a ton of fun. LaVelle, you wanted to say? I don't want to cut you off. If you had one last thing you want to get in there.
No, you remember I'm pretty famous for not putting pager on the
Oh, that's
MVP
right.
ballot. And
Oh,
I had
God.
all kinds of players come up to me and say, I started an argument in the clubhouse. I can't remember what town I was in, but someone asked me about not putting pager on the ballot, and I responded, and then a hitter said, "Yeah, that's right, because pitchers you have a Cy Young award. That's what they deserve. They don't deserve MVP." And the pitcher's like, "No, we should be good enough." The whole clubhouse is now arguing over should pitchers be eligible for MVP awards. So actually, I believe the 20th anniversary of that is coming up, or 25th is coming up.
Yeah,
So remember that
25th.
25th anniversary
Yeah.
column. There's a lot of stuff that went on. I'll tell you one quick story. Terry Ryan, the Twins GM at the time, his secretary was bilingual. Juanita Lagos, that was her name. He had her call me at the office, leave a message, pretending to be the secretary for the president of the Dominican Republic. And so all this swearing is coming across I'm running back messages. All of a sudden, someone's cursing me out in Spanish and then switches to English. "How could you not vote for our national treasure, Pedro Martinez?" And Terry Ryan felt so bad. He called like a half an hour. I had Juanita call. "I'm sorry, I should have done that," but stuff like that was going on after the award was announced.
Oh, that is legendary. Excellent. This was a ton of fun. I know that our followers are just going to eat it up, and I'm sure they'll have whatever thoughts they do in the comments. So thank you so much for your transparency. Had a great time with this. LaVelle Neal, continued success up there in the Twin Cities. Try and stay warm. Susan Slusser, I will see you at some point, hopefully out there on the baseball beat. Ken Davidoff, I have no idea what the hell you do for your life anymore, but just, whatever it is, keep living
I'm tanned and rested.
Yeah, well, if you're tanned, then I hope you save the receipt on that tanning gun because it didn't do a great job. But thank you all so much. I hope you had as much fun as we did today. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
That's good.
Jim
All
Harbaugh
right.
to the Raiders.
No, stop it. That'll do it for now for our one-of-a-kind producer, the awfully talented Robbie Scirocco. I am Chris Rose. We will see you next time here on the Chris Rose Rotation, a production of John Boy Media.